Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 Quick Match gameplay. This time around we are on Doom Reach playing as the Lizardmen against the Skaven. And so this time around for this build I did decide to center it on Mazda Money. For those of you who did see my stream, I think it was maybe a month ago, I don't know, I first experimented with a build similar to this one against the Skaven, mostly because I had no idea what I was doing. I don't really play Lizardmen all that often. The reason I do bring Mazda Money, and I think he's a decent choice in here, is because he's good at squishing mobs of infantry and mobs of cheap chaff. That's really his specialty. He's got two great crowd control spells, Ruination of Cities and Banishment, so he can really deal with those crap troops really quickly. He does have Sunburst Standard of Hexoatl, which grants him an extra 12% missile resist and grants him missile resist to all the troops around him. He does have also grant them extra melee defense, which is really nice. He's very tanky, of course. And he does have a good selection of spells. So besides his bounce spells, he does have the Shield of the Old Ones, which is an ability. Great ability in my opinion. If your opponent brings Sensor Bearers, not the rarest pick. If they bring the different sort of chariots, like the Doom Wheel, like though the Doom Wheel's melee attacks aren't magic, but the rest of it, the bolts are magic. If they bring Warp Lightning Cannons, if they bring the Screeching Bells or the Plague Furnaces, if your opponent brings any of those units, even if they bring Skrulk, you can mitigate a good chunk of that damage simply by using Shield of the Old Ones, and it's pretty solid. It's 17 seconds of 44% magic resist. Leadership, not that useful in dinos, because unless they're getting surrounded and hit from all sides, then usually Fear and Terror doesn't kick in. And they usually hold just fine. But regardless, for spells here, we did bring a whole plethora of stuff. We did bring Curse of the Midnight Wind, which I think is great just to keep your front line alive for a while. Harmonic Convergence can help snipe out targets, it can help a single flank win. Apotheosis for the heals, of course. Shield of the Old Ones, which I've already discussed. And Arcane Unforging, which I think is nice against Skaven. It's basically a very strong Spirit Leech with an ability recharge debuff, which against, say, Skaven is rather strong. Skaven are very susceptible to Lord Sniping. For the front line here, nothing too fancy. 3 units of Sarge Warriors with shields, as well as 2 units of Sarge Spears with shields. The Sarge Spears are there in case my opponent decides to, say, bring Rat Ogres, which my opponent did not disappoint. He definitely went with them. And these guys will do really well against Rat Ogres. They've got monstrous melee defense, or not melee defense, but it's okay. Good melee defense, 60 armor, a lot of HP, bronze shields, and more importantly, really high weapon strength with bonus for large. So they'll do really well. Up in the sky, we do have a Skink Chief, another sort of really troublesome unit for the Skaven. He can snipe out artillery pieces. He's pretty hard to hit, even with the debuffs to his hitbox. He's still a tough target to hit. Gives you an extra charge of Cold Blooded. He can snipe down lords. He can be a major league nuisance. We do have Best on with the Rev Crystal just to provide some extra melee power, fear, terror, all that sort of stuff, as well as some healing for our front line or other troops, and a Sarge Scarvet with a Plaque of Dominion. And this guy is, in case my opponent decided to bring, say, a Hell Pit Abomination, or more realistically against Rat Ogres, Doom Wheels, the big chariots, this guy will do really well. And he does bring a Plaque of Dominion to the field, which is a great -8 leadership debuff, helps you ensure those Fear and Terror nukes. On the flanks, 2 units of Chameleon Skinks, so nothing too fancy there, but these guys, of course, can once again chip away at lower armored units like Hell Pit Abominations, like Rat Ogres. They'll do really well against them, and they can chip them down over time. For my opponent's build, a bit of an odd one, though definitely, once again, I wouldn't say, I often see builds that I don't expect, and yet I think they're reasonably competitive, and I definitely think that's the case here. A bunch of Clan Rats in the front, basically just to soak up the charge. This is a little odd. Normally you'll see Skaven slaves used for that role because they're cheaper. Tretch Craven Tail, a little bit of an iffy choice here. That's one thing I'd say is a little iffy. He does have Stay Here, I'll Get Help, Ruminous Valor, and then Tretch's Raiders, which is a pretty powerful buff. Surprisingly, no Lucky Skull Helm, which I think is basically mandatory if you're going with Tretch. My opponent also does have Warlock Engineer. No Plague Priest or anything like that. He does have Warp Lightning, he does have Scorch, and he does have the Doom Rocket, which is always fun, as well as Warpstone Armor. So some really strong stuff there. In the back, the Warp Lightning Cannon is situated atop 3 units of Skaven Slave Slingers. And for his main line, for his main combat troops, my opponent does have 3 units of Stormmen, Sword and Board. These guys will do well against Sarge Warriors, and Temple Guard and units like that. All things considered, which is pretty important. And they should definitely hold better than this front line. One of the unfortunate things about Stormmen, though, is that they don't have immunity to psychology, so they are definitely susceptible still to terror bombs. 2 units of Stormmen Halberds provide my opponent with some anti-large, and these 2 Rat Ogres can also do pretty well against the large monsters, simply because they've got mass and armor piercing. Personally, I do think that this build is okay. I normally would prefer, bring Plague Monks over Stormmen just because they're cheaper and I think, more efficient for the cost. But regardless, we'll see how things go. As I do push in, you can see I'm chipping away at my opponent here with the Skink Chief, immediately gunning for the Warp Lightning Cannons. One of the big problems for Skaven artillery in general is that it is very tall and very easy to hit. You can see immediately there's some shots going in now. I'm taking some peppering fire from the Skaven Slave Slingers, so I'm actually going to juke around. One of the things, my opponent's deployment here a little iffy, and instead of situating himself in the back and kind of staying in the back, my opponent decided to push forward. One of the things I think here that is worth mentioning is that always check the lay of the land. Total War isn't like other RTS games where the verticality doesn't matter. You can see over there a rocket headed there from Asmodeus just splatters over there in the air and does a little bit of damage to Star Warriors. But in Warhammer, verticality matters. It's not like a lot of other RTS games where you say it might have just 2 or 3 different levels of height, and you can just easily shoot all trajectories are the same or stuff like that. So because of that, my opponent's Warp Lightning cannons can't get on target. Really, a better deployment would have probably been over here, maybe further back. From this ridge, so I'd have to crest it to advance. Regardless, now he's being forced to push forward. He decides to push forward with his Warp Lightning cannons, and he's being chipped apart by the Skink Chief, who's just peppering away. You can see a ruination of cities going down there, just destroying Stormvermin, sending them flying. You can see damage, really beat up 2 units there. Already, a gun is down. The Warp Lightning cannon is just taking that constant barrage of fire. And yes, my opponent is using the Skaven Slave Slingers, but despite the nerfs to the hitbox on the Skink Chief, he's still a tough target. Here in the front line, in the meantime, the Clan Rats, unsupported by these Stormmen due to Mazdamuni's solo charge, are getting completely dumpstered. The Star Warriors just come screaming in, and over here you can see I actually forgot about my Star Scarvet. He just sits here on the back line because I didn't want him going into the Warp Lightning Cannon, and so I just set him back. Over here you can see the Banishment pushing through. The Warp Lightning Cannon on 2 guns now, and getting chipped away at constantly by that very, very angry Skink Chief. And my opponent not really focusing it down, focusing on Mazdamundi with him. And you can see he's already lost another gun. So the Warp Lightning Cannon almost gone. Over here, Rat Ogres put down by a mix of darts as well as spears. And really, the front line is looking pretty disastrous right about now. You can see over here Mazdamundi with Shield of the Old Ones diving through, tearing through these Stormvermen. Curse of the Midnight Wind going down. On the flank here, Clan Rats getting dumpstered by Star Spears. You can see these guys already up to 46 kills, just tearing these guys a new one. And really, things are looking pretty grim. Over here, the Rat Ogre is getting zoned out, sniped down by the darts from the Chameleon Skinks, just forced away. Granted, here in this sort of stretch of ground, they're probably not going to have to worry too much about getting hit with the trees in there, but, you know, they lose another model. And in the meantime, these Star Spears are pushing through. They're going to nab this Warlock Engineer, who my opponent throws in his path, in their path to slow him down, but these guys should be able to tear him apart pretty quickly, despite not being oriented against infantry. In the pits, in the meantime, you can see this King Chief has managed to tear apart the cannon, which is a major problem for my opponent. He now has, that's basically 1,000 gold down the drain for no gain. And now the King Chief is able to focus on Tretch. Tretch got hit by a Arcane Unforging a little earlier, and now he's just falling apart. Now, my opponent's force here just completely in full rout in a lot of areas. In other areas, you know, you can see the Stormmen rallying a little bit. So I'm kind of moving Mazdamundi around. I'm trying to get my charges off. I'm trying to plow through these Stormmen, really put them down a bit. Once they drop below 50% HP, they become a lot less stable. They lose a lot of melee defense. They lose a good chunk of their leadership, so they become much weaker. So that's rather important. You can see over here the Stormmen just getting destroyed. These guys over here are going to possibly tear out. They're wavering. They're in some very bad shape. Up in the sky, the Skink Chief basically looking for targets. I was trying to hit Tretch, but amongst the trees, the Skink isn't really able to hit him. He does hit him, I think, a few times when he sort of breaks cover there. But there we go. That was a hit. But well, let's hear Crossfire on the Rat Ogres. My opponent does get him into the back of my Chameleon Skinks while I was distracted, but, you know, the Rat Ogres here getting picked apart. In the pits, Sword Spears still tearing these guys apart. And this whole time I'm wondering what I'd forgotten. I felt like I didn't have as many troops as I should have. And, yeah, the reason might be that Sar Scarvet is still kind of sitting around. And, yeah, he would be kind of useful here against the Rat Ogres that are destroying my Sword Spears. Yeah, that would have been nice, but, yeah, that's it happens. Sometimes you just forget, you know. So, Sar Scarvet, he's gonna sit there for the rest of the game. Stormmen here getting dumpstered, getting torn apart basically by the Chameleon Skinks. The Warlock Engineer did manage to disentangle himself from the fight with Sour Spears. Honestly, if your opponent as Skaven, if your opponent is Skaven and they decide to disengage from your infantry as SARS, as the Lizardmen, they will disengage. They're going to succeed at that. There's nothing you can really do about it. You can see over here, I do hit some of these SARS troops with an Apotheosis, obviously going for the unit that's not too beat up. These guys have so few models that at this point it would be a waste. They need a Rev Crystal more than an Apotheosis. Over here, the Clan Rats are routing, though. You can see the terror or the full breaks going down. These Rat Ogres here are having a terrible time. They're down to 4 models. Surprisingly, a lot of HP, but really at this point, it's just too little too late for my opponent's army. It's just falling apart. Here in the pits, Stormmen routing, Tretch in full rout, and it's going to be GG as my opponent's army completely shatters. My Sarge Scarvet completely ignored for 90% of the game. A close victory, so not even a Pyrrhic victory, despite literally having units stay out of the fight. This shows a few things. One, this composition is rather good against Skaven. Despite being about 2,000 gold down, we did throughout this entire game, we did manage to pull out a win. Mazdamundi, between his magic resist, his missile resist, his raw damage against blobs is really strong against Skaven. He can really help you deal with those annoying troops. He's got Arcane Unforging to snipe out enemy lords, which is great. He's very tanky. He's just hard to shut down in general. The Skink Chief, in my opinion, a must-bring against Skaven. If your opponent brings artillery, if they bring warp lightning cannons, if they bring plate claw catapults, not the latter aren't the most popular, but you will sometimes see them. A Skink Chief can really shut those units down. You park him in front of him, he'll shoot the guns because the guns are tall and they're in the way, and you destroy all 3 guns and you're done. The artillery piece is offline. It's not even going to cost you like half the Skink Chief's ammo. If your opponent ignores your Skink Chief to boot to try to shut down Mazdamundi like my opponent did here, then all the more power to you. You're going to knock out his artillery with even less losses. Star Spears, they trade really well with Rat Ogres and help in abominations. That's really what they're there for. And then normal Sarge warriors will just dish out the hurt to normal Skaven. They'll do okay against Stormmen. I do believe Stormmen would sword and board if it was an uninterrupted fight. The two are just allowed to go head to head. I do believe the Stormmen win, but if they are trying to slug it out like this with monster support, then the Sarge Warriors are just so strong. They're going to dumpster everything. They'll beat up Stormmen, they'll beat up Clan Rats horribly. They'll really run these troops over. Community King's a decent unit, I think, just for picking apart your opponent's troops. They can also interdict backline troops, which is nice. And then Bastiladon for the heal. So really a solid comp all around. The Sarge Scarvet, despite Forgotten, is actually really valuable in this composition often. It's just that here my opponent didn't really bring targets for him, and I completely blanked on him and just forgot the guy. Had my opponent brought, say, a Cauldron or a Screeching Bell or Screaming Bell, then I think I would have probably remembered that I had Sarge Scarvet, but there simply wasn't any targets for him, and so I didn't feel pressured by any large. But yeah, Sarge Scarvet's actually really useful. With his ability to debuff enemy leadership against a lower leadership faction like Skaven, he's really powerful. He's pretty quick on his feet. He can shut down Doom Wheels. He can run down all those big annoying chariots, and it makes him good. So regardless, good game to my opponent, Norman Polsky. If I was to make a few comments, one, warp lightning cannons are not that good against Skaven. The reason being that Skink Chiefs shut him down hard. That makes using artillery against lizards very, very risky. Now, I don't know if this will ever be fixed. I don't really know how it can be fixed, to be quite honest. The way that the shooting patterns work and the way the artillery has a huge hitbox. I don't know how that could be fixed, besides giving maybe the warp lightning cannon a bunch more HP, but right now, warp lightning cannons are not a great pick here. I think you're much better off relying on a mix of Doom Wheels, chariots, Rat Ogres, backed by Skaven slaves. So an old school sort of mob build is going to be very potent here. Perhaps Helped Abominations could be okay. I haven't really tried them, but I think they could be okay. Not sure about the Poison Wind Globadiers. Maybe they deserve a shot. But really, in my experience, generally a monster-heavy build is the way to go with Skaven. Not this artillery-heavy stuff, just because of Skink Chiefs, which will punish you horribly, and it can be very difficult to shut them down. Regardless, though, good game to my opponent. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe below. If you have any comments, any criticism, any questions about the game, be sure to ask. I'll do my best to respond as soon as I'm able. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.